to beware of spoilers. I am Adam. I just saw Where the Crawdads Sing, which, based on how Barnes & Noble has been shoving that book down my throat for the last, 2-3 years at this point, I figured I was going in to see something reasonably good. And when I say Barnes & Noble shoved it down my throat, I mean, I'm a pretty avid shopper at Barnes & Noble. Right now, if you go in, you can get half price on Criterion Collection movies, which is a great deal. You can get a Blu-ray for like $20. It comes with a bunch of shit. Like I picked up the other day, I, Daniel Blake, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Because I haven't watched the movie yet. It's in my car. What we are here to talk about is Where the Crawdads Sing, which was their like pick of the month for a long ass time. And I'm looking at this movie, and there are a lot of things that happen over the course of this movie that make very little sense, aren't properly exposited. The movie ends at the wrong point, and it's just that there's so much with this movie that I'm watching. I'm like, seriously? Like, I don't get it. Like, honestly, I feel like I'm watching a movie and I'm like, first of all, there are a number of times where it's like, things are just happening. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. Like, that... Okay, so I'm gonna spoil the fuck out of the movie, so, okay, there we go. Now, the movie's about this girl who was abandoned by her parents, and left in this house. Like, her father was abusive, her father beat the fuck out of her and her siblings, and her mother, and, you know, anyone who came, it was just, like, the father is, like, the whole thing feels like a Lifetime movie, but, like, with a much bigger budget and a song by Taylor Swift and Reese Witherspoon attached as the producer. Like, everyone leaves, and then this little girl is abandoned in the marsh, and she's living in this house by herself, and she's got to harvest mussels to sell to this very nice, and only black family in the movie that has speaking roles, considering that's not indicative of North Carolina in the late 1950s, early 1960s. There's a lot playing with race in this movie, or there's a lot that should have been playing with race in this movie, and they just don't. Like, take for example, like, the whole thing where it's like, the girl is an outcast, a social outcast, and she's going to this place, and it's before her dad leaves, and it's just her and her dad, and she goes to the general store to talk to, the black family who owns it, and it's incredibly racist, because, like, the guy, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Archie Bunker, but, like, the guy is basically doing what Lionel does whenever he's talking to Archie in the early seasons, and he's doing, like, the over-the-top, like ridiculous stereotype voice with slang to fuck with Archie. Like, that's his entire thing, and, like, whenever they interact. And it's really funny, because, like, he talks, and he's just a normal guy whenever he talks to anyone else, but when he talks to Archie, he puts on that persona. It's a great bit that they do over the first few seasons. But at the same time, like, you know, here it's just, they're just doing it, and they don't really give a reason why they're doing it, besides the fact that, like, you know, that's just who they are. Like, so, like, that's happening, and then they go here, she goes to this family, and the mom, and again, keep in mind, this is like shortly after Brown versus the Board of Education, but it's like, I want to say it's like 1956, 1957, this is supposed to be taking place. Maybe it's a little bit different, maybe it's a little bit earlier, but either way, it's either immediately after or like a few years after Brown versus Board of Education reintegrated schools, and this town was like, oh no, everyone's welcome in the school, and then you go to the school and it's entirely white and still segregated, and it's like, oh, well, that's a thing, I guess. Like, I guess we'll just deal with that and pretend that's not a thing here. And looking at, what the fuck are you doing, motherfucker? Yeah, I know, this guy, shut up, stupid aggressive thing. like, looking at what they're trying to do with this movie, it is kind of confusing on a few levels, where it's like, well, what is the point? Like, the idea of, like, the Marsh girl being ostracized and set aside from society, and it's like, well, we had an entire subset of people living in the fucking Carolinas during this time period, in, like, that were doing that, and they weren't just this one white girl who was living by herself in the marshes. Like, that's really dumb. And then there's other anachronistic things, like, at one point, when they're investigating, the police officers go to the house and they look in her window, and they look and they see this hat that's a piece of evidence on her bed, and they're like, well, it's in plain sight, so we can just go in and grab it. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I feel like that happened after, and I was right, where it's the Supreme Court case that decided the plain view doctrine was a thing wasn't decided until 1971, and that investigation takes place in 1969. Same goes for, well, like, and it's just kind of weird to me. How Kaya is characterized fluctuates greatly. I think part of the problem is we have a girl who is cast out from society, doesn't have a social safety net in any way, and doesn't have anyone else with her to interact with. This girl knows a little bit, like, even by the time she starts reading, because that's the thing, is up until she meets the first white guy, the blonde white guy, she doesn't know how to read or write, and then he teaches her how to read and write. She still knows a lot about the intricacies of, like, dating and such, despite living in the marsh, and, like, because that's the question, like, if she's living in the marsh, you know, by herself, like, is she going out a lot, and like, going to town to see a lot of, like, that is not made clear in this movie, and her ability to perfectly put on makeup, it's like, oh, okay, well, it's just the character's a self-insert of the author, like, I understand that, I don't know, it feels a little bit weird. Also, courtroom nitpicky stuff, but it bothers the fuck out of me. People who don't understand the rules of what is allowed and what is not allowed in evidence, people who don't understand what does and does not constitute hearsay, does or does not understand what constitutes speculation. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like that kind of thing, it's not even being done in a way that makes the most sense for the story to work. It's slow as fuck. The movie's 2 hours long, but it feels every minute of it, where I'm just like, can we just get this over with? Like, I do not give a shit about any of this. And a lot of it can be cut out, especially what happens after we find out the verdict, because here's the thing, I'm going to spoil it for you, for people who are listening and may not want to see the movie, but, like, the question is whether or not, like this guy that Kaya was involved with, ends up dead. And he is found at the bottom of this fire tower, dead. And there's a lot I don't understand about how she managed to do all of this, where it's like, okay, so she like that's the problem with this movie, is that he laid out the timeline, and it's like, it's so airtight. Where it's like, she goes to, what's it called, and the thing is, too, it's like, what, you mean to tell me that the police didn't flip that entire house once they found that, and they didn't execute a search? Like, it's just, it's so stupid to me that, because here's the thing, even if the movie, let's say the movie takes place in 1973, which the movie takes place in 1969, they're very specific about that, and like, let's say the movie takes place in 1973, we'll push it back a few years to make it fit a little bit better, and it takes place after that decision that established the plain view doctrine. You mean to tell me that happens, and they're not flipping and searching every inch of that house and being like, well, we're looking for a tiny ass thing that would have indicated that it was, like, that it was her. Like, that thing could be in a book. You mean to tell me they didn't flip over? Like, the whole thing is so dumb. And then on top of it, like, the way the case is laid out, is not laid out in a way where it's reasonable doubt that keeps her from getting convicted. It is complete implausibility that keeps her from getting convicted. Where it's like, she's at dinner with the publisher, and then like a few hours, like she goes there, kills him, makes it look like an accident, goes, like, cleans up all the evidence, and then leaves. I just don't understand it. I really don't, like, I don't, like, the way they laid it out, it makes zero sense as to how they managed to do all that. Like, how the fuck would she know he would be up there? How the fuck would she know, like, there's, like, when he lays out the case, it's like, this makes zero sense at all, as to how that could have happened. Like, and look, I totally get what they're going for. It's like, oh, she sees herself as an animal in the marsh, the same as any other animal in the marsh. That's looking at, like, you know, it needs to be done. Like, that needs to be done. And it's like, it's so stupid. Like, just have the other guy kill him. Like, that would alleviate the problem. And then on top of it, to take the movie, which ends on a triumphant note, at that point, like, if you lay the case out better, you can make it where there's some level of plausibility where we don't know if she did it. Like, you don't know if she did it or not. Like, that, I understand, like, that would have worked, I think. And then, if you do that, and then get to the end of the movie where you're explaining, like, we don't need an explanation as to who did it. You don't need to lay it out and be like, okay, so she actually did do it, or lay it out that she didn't actually do it. Either way, doesn't need to be done. Doesn't need to be done. And the whole thing with her not being in town is this really dumb thing that is introduced only in the third act of the movie. That's like, well, wait a second, how the fuck can you convict her? Considering it's 1969 and there's no cell phones, which in this day, which I guess is the only reason why it's set in 1969, is because if there were cell phones, it would have 100% screwed her, because the location tracking would have 100% been able to put her there and back. It's so fucking stupid. And how is it that she, like, oh, did she disguise herself, which is what they claim she did? Like, is there... There's just so much of this movie that's just really fucking dumb, and I'm like, well, this is stupid. And then you're watching it the entire way through, and you're just like, I don't care about any of this backstory bullshit. Like, this would function a lot better as a short film. I don't need to see all the backstory. You ever watch one of those? Like, the last time I felt this way after seeing a movie was when I saw that dumbass one, Hard Luck Love Song, last year. Like, that was the worst movie I'd seen since theaters reopened prior to this one. I think this one unseats it only because Hard Luck Love Song has a few, like, interesting moments and a few interesting character moments, and there are points where the movie could work. I don't see a world where this movie could have been made in a way where it does work. And on top of that, doesn't even go into the fact that it reinforces these stereotypes of the South that ultimately are completely inaccurate. Like, there's a book, The South Never Plays Itself, which I highly recommend anyone who has an interest in pop culture history in America read. And it's one of those things where it's like, if we look at across pop culture history how the South is portrayed, the South is always portrayed as, you know, the land of the wholesome. Like, not just in movies and stuff like that, but also if you look at TV. Like, TV is an example. Look at Mayberry. Look at, you know, any number of other towns from pop culture in that era, and then look at how pop culture portrays cities. Cities are homes of drug use and heathendom and you know, and all of this nonsense that kind of happens. Meanwhile, if you look at, like, how it's portrayed, you know, the small towns, it's like the worst crimes you see in small towns are like, well, here's the town drunk who's going to let himself into and out of jail. Like, if that's the worst that they have there, that's substantially better than the worst that they have in the cities. And what the fuck is this guy doing with a shirt out of his car? Like that. This kind of lends itself to that, not in the no crime happens in the South aspect, because look, I mean, there is a murder in this, even if it is portrayed as, you know, a righteous murder. But the issue is, it's this idea that, look, the South didn't have didn't have minorities. And the minorities that were there were all subservient, even into the 60s. Because, she gets her book published, up until she gets her book published, the only non-white people you see are the owner of the general store and his wife. Those are the only non-white people you see in the entire fucking movie. Then, she gets her book published and she gets some money, so she refurbishes her house and gets electricity, and then you get, more black people in the movie, but they're just the moving crew that's helping her get her stuff into and out of her house. That's it. That's all that's there in the entire movie of any ethnic group that's not white. And you're looking at it and you're like, well, that's not entirely accurate. And on top of that, they're all subservient. It is the most, ridiculous portrayal of race in a movie that I've seen in a long-ass time. And then on top of that, to be this movie would have worked leagues better. And look, that's not even fixing all this stuff with the legal procedural aspect that got fucked up all along the way, the entire way through this piece of shit. But, they could have fixed a lot of the problems with the movie and made the movie more bearable if Kai is black. If Kai is black, you don't need to come up with reasons why the town hates her. Because at that time, in Carolina, people were still incredibly racist. You don't need to be like, oh, well, she lives in the marsh, and she's a white girl who lives in the marsh, and everyone hates her because of that. Meanwhile, it's you have, two black... Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. There was another black person in the background of the court... not in the courthouse, outside the courthouse. It's the sanitization of history that we're seeing. And look, we have two very prominent, Southern personalities involved with making this movie. Taylor Swift is a very prominent Southern personality. Reese Witherspoon is also from the South. They are going out of their way to portray an image of the South that is as favorable as possible, because they know if they don't do that, people are going to be upset. But the thing is, if we want to be true to history, and I know I just said it in a way that didn't sound very articulate, but if we're going to be true to history and make this movie work a little bit better, making Kaya black would have solved that problem. And it would have made so that we get to her in the court case, it would have fit better, because then we don't need to sit here and be like, look, the only reason that you did this was because of this. And then it's okay, this girl was abandoned in the forest. This girl was abandoned in the forest by herself for however long she was living in the marsh, for however long she was living in the marsh. And no one did it but this family. And there's definitely the undercurrent there that no one in the town cared for the girl besides the black family. I'm not taking that away from the movie, because it does do that. But at the same time, to be at the same time, everything that happens in this movie to Kaya, and the fact of the matter is, we're dealing with institutional white families in this movie at the core of the issue, where, this guy is falling in love with the marsh girl, and he can't be with her because of the optics of it. Oh, I'm sorry, this is only a few years after interracial marriage was legalized. That, everything about that works so much better in that regard. And the fact that it's not in the movie in that way is just fucking ridiculous. And the thing is, too, it's the fact of the matter is, if we can take it and flip it that way and it becomes something about race that easily, it means the story's not, that means that this story inherently has a problem in not dealing with race. And I think it stands to mention that the author of the book, Delia Owens, did have that issue where she's wanted for murder in Africa. For, implicated in something there. Where it was some kind of thing where they were shooting, they went out of their way to shoot poachers or something. It does stand to mention that, especially considering it puts this whole movie in that perspective. Take into consideration the fact that, look at what, Stephanie Meyer said when they were making Twilight. You cannot cast people of color in this movie unless they're cast as the bad guy. It was an edict that she had as an executive producer. And that was in 2008. That's the thing here, what the author's personal beliefs do factor into how a book should be read. It's an important part of it. And looking at this movie in this way and being like, well, why would they not do this? It's ridiculous. I genuinely cannot come up with a reason as to explain why they would decide to not have her be black in this movie. Like, and don't give me the bullshit, oh, well, in the book, she was what? I don't give a shit what they did in the book. The book is the book is the book. And that was one of the things that I'm watching this movie, I'm like, I didn't read the book. Am I going to need to have read the book to have understood this movie? And the answer is no. You can walk into the movie and get most of everything pretty simply. It's not too difficult to understand what's going on, but it's just it's this weird situation where it's like, why was this done this way? And there is no good answer. There is no good answer at all. I don't know. I guess I didn't have high hopes for the movie. My thoughts were expressly neutral going into it. I had not read the original. I had not read I had not read any reviews going into it. I had seen the trailer a few times before going to see this movie. That said, I don't understand how this movie, like I said before, Lifetime original movie with a much bigger budget. I'm just at a loss for words. I mean, I truly am. I just it's not good. It's not worth your time. If you really want to see it because you read the book or some nonsense, then I don't know what to tell you. If you want to do that, then I guess it's your time, not mine. I've given you the warning. Nothing else I can do about that at that point. But on that note, we will wrap up there for today. Tomorrow I'll be attending the Long Island International Film Expo, so I will be talking about some of the movies and shorts that I see there, and what I can find out from people after I attend the panels. Later this week, we will be doing a review of all 6 episodes without spoilers of the new documentary series, The Last Movie Star, directed by Ethan Hawke. I'm 1 episode through it so far. I'll be watching the rest, and we will be doing a full review of that at some point in the next few days. We'll wrap up there for today. We'll be back with more stuff as it happens, but until then, have a great rest of your week.